So there can be only, well, maybe just a few sequels as I delve into probably the least controversial one of the Highlander franchise. They can't seem to figure out exactly what name to slap on it, but by whatever name, this is my look at Highlander 3. Following the death of his wife Heather in 16th century Scotland, the immortal Connor MacLeod journeys to Japan in order to learn from the immortal sorcerer Nakano. However, the ancient and powerful warrior Kane, along with his henchmen, find the cave of Nakano in Mount Neri, taking the head of the Master of Illusion, but in the process burying themselves into the mountain due to the power of its quickening. 4 centuries later, an excavation project unearths the cave of Nakano, which allows the immortal trio to finally escape. Meanwhile, living in Marrakech with his adoptive son John, MacLeod feels the pull back to the place of the gathering, New York City, to face his long-buried adversary, realizing the prize had not yet been won. Yet the beheadings in both Mount Neri and New York attract the attention of archaeologist Dr. Alexandra Johnson and NYPD detective John Sten. As Sten tries to follow up on the headhunter case from nearly a decade prior, Alex digs deeper into the history of the clan MacLeod, which draws her closer to danger as Kane arrives in New York. The sight of Alex stirs memories in Connor of Sarah Barrington, a noble Englishwoman he loved during the time of the French Revolution and had to leave behind in order to escape execution. As the past and present converge for the immortal Highlander, both love and consequence are put to the test in a battle of sorcery versus virtue, knowing that in the end, there can be only one. So the third installment in the Highlander film franchise saw its initial release in late 1994 in the Philippines and the United Kingdom, eventually hit US cinemas on January 27, 1995, under the title of Highlander the Final Dimension, while many foreign territories got as either Highlander 3 the Sorcerer or Highlander the Final Conflict, as well as a much more extended, fuller version of the film, as the US theatrical cut was trimmed down for a PG-13 rating, excising some violence and sex scenes and whatnot to make it a little less enticing overall, but thankfully there was a home video release of an approved director's cut that I'll definitely be discussing later on in this whole thing, but the genesis of Highlander 3 really stems from the utter complete disaster that was Highlander 2 The Quickening, being thrashed by critics, thrashed by fans, destroyed at the box office, did not come out well, total disaster behind the scenes. So the producers of the franchise really wanted to take a step back and reassess things and figure out where they could possibly go to reappreciate the fans back to the franchise and the whole idea of things. Even though they already have the TV series going with Adrian Paul as Duncan MacLeod, really wanted to keep going with Christopher Lambert in the theatrical films as Connor MacLeod here. So producer William Panzer and story writer Brad Meerman, who had worked on Christopher Lambert's film before this, Night Moves, and worked with Lambert on many more films in the future, really started to devise a new idea for this sequel that would completely ignore Highlander 2 and make itself feel very comfortable and very safe towards what you knew from the first film and feel like it was like not pitting outside the lines at all. And of course, Christopher Lambert took a little persuading to get into the film after so much went wrong with the second film. So they offered him a nice little payday and kind of get him more involved with the creative process as he wanted to make sure things remained on track and still please fans in a certain way. And he even did have a bit of a pay dispute type of thing at one point in time to the production where he kind of walked off set, but eventually things smoothed out and things got going on, so it was not nearly as much of a disaster behind the scenes as Highlander 2 was. But getting the director involved in this thing being Andrew Morahan of a music video background, much like Russell Mulcahy was for the first film, working with bands like Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, Van Halen, and even a whole bunch of stuff with George Michael, really seemed at the time to really kind of spark off that same type of creative juice, that same type of appeal that you had of what Russell Mulcahy brought to the original film. And he does kind of bring some of that into this film and didn't really kind of venture too much out into theatrical features after this, really kind of kept in that music video vein and whatnot, but You could definitely see with this film the MTV early 90s style that he has going on. That he does have a lot of cinematic sensibility about things, how he moves the camera and has certain dynamic, dramatic shots and everything, and certainly the use of very vibrant color schemes, some pastels here and there. It does bring a lot of flair to the film, but it doesn't quite match the style that Russell Mulcahy has, this very unique type of thing with his use of different lenses and very technical ideas of how to use different things to create such a bigger operatic sense about things. Highlander 3 does a little bit of that sweeping quality when you get in the Highlands of Scotland. You have all these helicopter shots going around and just having a certain breadth of something going on, but doesn't quite hit that level of artistic brilliance in my view, but it still has very solid cinematography overall, and Andrew Morahan does bring a good sensibility towards how he stages things, how he puts together the fight scenes and all these different angles and different things that he got going on in this whole thing. You definitely have a sense of that the film is really kind of trying to capture a little bit of what defines Highlander in a certain sense with cinematic visuals and certain types of music that it has going on the whole thing. But the cinematography of Stephen Chivers here, who is pretty much only real other notable cinematic credit is Richard Stanley's Dust Devil, does offer some good stuff here. It does have a level of quality and skill and talent here to make a good looking picture that has a lot of dynamic camera moves, a lot of good visuals to really make it pop on screen, to make it a very engaging visual experience overall. But talking about the story elements of this film, that there is a lot of smudging of continuity that becomes necessary if you want to make sequels to a very definitive end that was the original Highlander, saying that all the immortals have been vanquished, prize has been won, the entire conflict is over with. If you want to make sequels, you got to smudge continuity. If you're a fan of the franchise, you very much have gotten used to this, and whether you like it or not, this is probably the only way you really can make sequels without doing a complete continuity reboot, which the TV series did kind of do softly, that it really kind of implied that, yeah, the events of the first film kind of generally happened, but kind of went down in a slightly different way. That wasn't the gathering, it wasn't the prize, it was a little bit different and whatnot. There's a lot more mortals in the world, so it was a little bit more sort of a soft reboot continuity diversion or whatnot that I felt was a little bit more digestible in certain ways than a lot of the sequels tried to do. Highlander 3 here really kind of goes off and makes those little concessions to make the story possible in a certain way, because otherwise all you can do is a bunch of prequels that really don't amount to much of anything, because you're following the same character who you know how his story ends. So there's not much point to having him battle other immortals when you already know they're all going to be dead by the time the first film actually happened. But a lot of the stuff in the film does call very well on the back of Christopher Lambert, who really holds this franchise together so really well. Even in the second film, despite the quality of the content and material he was given, still brought the Christopher Lambert charm and that charisma that he has on screen, to have that twinkle in his eye or whatnot, to really kind of bring you something that is engaging and something that's very relatable and very much an entertaining type of protagonist to have to connect with and everything. And that's no different here, that he does bring in a good quality performance here that I see him doing all the time. No matter what the quality of the film is, I think Christopher Lambert always tries to bring forth the best of what he can deliver for a film. And there's very much so much with this film where he does carry the weight of emotion in this whole thing. You see a very heavy heart with this character when you're seeing the flashbacks he has to the French Revolution and being involved with this woman Sarah that he loves so deeply, and all the things that go down in that time period, and having that reflected in the present with the character portrayed again by Deborah Unger in this whole thing, have that sort of thing come back up into a soul or whatnot, and have that tremble up in him and try to grapple and deal with those emotions all over again in himself. It's an interesting thing to always see Lambert show those emotions, to project that stuff outwards, because he carries it so genuinely upon him. You just see so much what he brings on this whole thing, between the physicality he has to give into the film, but also all the different qualities of character and personality that he has. Still has lost some of that world weariness that he had in the first film, that sort of mystique that Mulcahy brought to him, but the quality of what he still brings to what the material demands in the script or whatnot, to have the charm that he has, the sort of wink in his eye, all these little things that he has with the emotion and the heartache and the romance and all these different things, still is brought forth on a very solid level. And Christopher Lambert so much, makes this franchise so much what it is, despite the quality of what he's given in the script. Always delivers something really well on screen, in my opinion. And Mario Van Peebles had worked with Christopher Lambert previously in the film Gunman, which I have reviewed in the last year. And they had such a great time working with one another and having such fantastic chemistry in that film that Lambert pretty much said, you should hire Mario Van Peebles to play the villain of this film, very much championed him for it. It's very interesting to see what this franchise does with its theatrical villains in a certain way, because it started out so strong with Clancy Brown as the Kurgan that they really kind of felt like they wanted to just keep replicating that over and over again. It's almost like the Star Trek franchise in a certain way. It's like they had Khan in Star Trek 2, and every so often they really kind of just want to revisit that, recapture Wrath of Khan again, to have a similar type of villain, a similar type of storyline, go through similar types of actions and whatnot. Highlander has the same type of problem. They had the Kurgan at the beginning of it, and Michael Ironside becomes a campy, over-the-top version of the Kurgan. And Mario Van Peebles injected humor in this whole thing, that Andrew Morahan did want to go with a much more serious, menacing approach for Kane, but Van Peebles apparently just suggested doing much more camp type of stuff to have him chew up the scenery more. And it's really one of the weak points of the film, that Mario Van Peebles is a solid actor, he's a solid director, he does good work, and what he's doing is a good quality performance for what he's trying to deliver towards it, but the direction of the character, the direction of the acting and whatnot, doesn't hold up to the strength of what the film could have been with a much more serious, menacing villain. That he gets into it. He's having a hell of a good time, I can tell you that. Van Peebles is enjoying himself in this role, chewing up scenery left, right, and center, inside and out. But it just becomes a character that offers no threat or whatnot. He always feels so out of step and out of place or whatnot, because even from the scenes you have beginning of the film where he's in the cave of Nakano or whatnot, his dialogue feels very, very modern. He has all these little things, these little quips or whatnot, and even after he's been locked up in a cave for 400 years and is now walking the streets of modern-day New York, he's got picked up all this slang, and somehow he learned to drive a car and all these little things that just makes it a very lightweight villain. Doesn't really hold the menace that you want him to, that I could really kind of equate him over to John Lone's performance in The Shadow, which I think was kind of the right tone that you could have had with this type of thing, where Lone's performance in that film does have a sense of wit to it, but he has a theatricality, a certain way of carrying himself that feels like he's a threat, that he has a mystique to him, that you could have had a character like that, a performance like that, that carried a certain weight, a certain heaviness about the entire threat that he poses in the film, especially with all these powers that he's gotten from Nakano that he's had for 4 centuries by the time we're getting up to the thick of the plot here, where he could have spent 400 years in that cave working with all this type of magic, working with this illusion and everything, the sorcery, to kind of perfect it and work with it. That could have been a deeper thing you could have explored more in the film or whatnot, if you really wanted to delve further into the character and make him a further master of illusion and sorcery or whatnot. It's a little vague of what they're really trying to call. They keep calling it illusion, but clearly it's much more than that, than just optical illusions or whatnot. There's obviously a sense of magic with teleportation and different little things here and there that make it much more closer to straight out magic, but they never seem to really want to embrace that as much as they could to make it as big of an issue in the film, to make it as spectacular as they want to, probably because, you know, they had $26 million budget, it's still a modest budget for the time of what they could have gotten for a much larger type of film, very effects heavy type of production. Seems like they were a little bit hampered. They want to do something a little fresh and new and exciting there with this character of Kane, to have this new twist for a villain or whatnot. But all the things with Kane just feel a little less than what they could have been. And even just, again, copying the Kurgan with the whole thing where he's got Connor's adopted son in there and whatnot, is like, it's so utterly blatant what they're doing there. They're copying directly from that scene from the first film and adding this little twist of illusion, so there's not actually danger in the whole thing. It's like, all these little things kind of amount to a character that just didn't seem like anyone really wanted to have a serious villain involved in this thing, or really push towards a more dynamic, interesting personality with him, like I suggested here, the few other directions they could have gone, but fact of the matter is, Mario Van Peebles had a bad idea there that didn't benefit the film in the long run, but definitely him and Christopher Lambert do have a solid chemistry. They work off very well together. I just wish that the character of Kane just had more weight and more seriousness to him instead of chewing up the scenery all over the place. But Deborah Unger is a solid actress, and she does a really good job in this film, that even if her material is a little bit limited in what she's given, is very copyish from Roxanne Hart's character in the first film with Brenda, having a similar type of journey to kind of put the pieces together about the history of this guy, hunting down Russell Nash, finding out he's Connor McLeod, and all these different things. But she does a good job of it. She's not tired with any of this stuff. She's really putting forth a very solid, genuine effort to make the character of Alex a very strong type of character that has a lot of solid conviction, a little bit of assertiveness. She's got a strength to her that does become appealing to someone like Connor. You'd be a guy who wants someone who has a strong heart to them, a strong will to them, and she definitely sparks off a wonderful chemistry and real spark of heat and whatnot with him. I feel like she's such an alluring personality with her looks and her talent that she brings out something that's just very appealing on screen and really just sparks off really well with Lambert here, because the two of them did their own sex scene together. No body doubles or whatnot. She was very much insistent that she would not have a body double in the whole thing, so they became very comfortable with one another to really have that type of connection in the film. So I very much applaud that type of thing, to really have that much of a chemistry and that sort of parity between the two actors and whatnot, to really kind of knock that type of thing into the quality of the film. That sometimes if you inject these romance stories, especially into a sequel or whatnot, if it's very copycatish from what you've done previously, can feel tired. But you got two solid, committed actors here between Lambert and Unger to really just deliver that very nicely in this film. The performances deliver something really strongly that makes up for a lot of the lackluster writing that the film does have. And you got a couple little nice little supporting players in this film, such as Mako as the Sorcerer Nakano here, who kind of does carry on a little bit from his role in the Conan films, but delivers a nice, solid, consistent performance for what he's known of in his career, but did a kind of nice piece of work in this film. But actor Martin Neufeld as Detective John Sten is a bit of a peculiar type of performance for me in this film, because I always thought maybe his line deliveries being very flat and very kind of disconnected always seemed like it was maybe a product of bad ADR, until I kind of realized the problem really didn't affect anyone else in any of the same scenes that he's in. So it's maybe just the fact that he delivers some very flat lines in the film that doesn't really come off as very genuine, very convincing in the type of way that it really needs to be. And kind of a weird type of thing that you continue on the sort of detective police storyline from the first film, but being handled by a completely new character. You're not bringing back Detective Bedso or anyone else to really kind of ignite that type of thing from the first film. Just seems a little bit disconnected in a certain way, storyline-wise and performance-wise. Just feels a little lackluster what he brings to the film, and ultimately his storyline doesn't affect too much of it. There's certain things in the film that kind of are a little bit contrived and a little bit filler here and there. How McLeod ends up in the hospital and gets put in the psych ward, then he has to go into the basement and encounters Kabul Khan to have the sword fight and everything, and then gets involved with the police type of stuff later on in the film. Just like, it feels like an underdeveloped storyline. A few little things that are kind of contrived to get one character from one place or another and stuff like that. There's certain things in the film that don't quite have the most organic flow for the storyline in a certain way. Just seems there's a lot of things in the film that it feels like there's weak story elements that really don't need to really be there so much. It feels like they just need to kind of, again, replicate various elements from the first film to make sure it all fits in the same little box or whatnot, which feels very strange in a certain way, because going back to the television series, there's a lot of good storylines in the whole thing. There's certain dud episodes here and there, but there's a lot of big storylines in the entire series that had a lot of good traction, a lot of good characters, a lot of good ideas going on. I think they could have probably taken some of those ideas and kind of transplanted them into the film or whatnot. And even again, there's so many good villains from that television series that don't rip off the Kurgan. There's so many good ones like Xavier St. Cloud or Callus or various other guys who just had so much interesting qualities that are very unique and bring their own dynamics to the characters of Duncan MacLeod and everyone else in the series, to have more fresher, original type of adversaries and storylines going on. Feels like they had so many good things going on with the television series, and when it came to the film, they just felt like they just didn't have enough ambition, or really just wanted to do anything that put a lot of effort into really just delving further into things. They wanted to play things as safe as possible, and just kind of comes off as a bit of a limp, lackluster film that feels like it's carbon copying the first film without anything fresh or new to kind of polish it up and sharpen it up and make it a little bit more punchy or a little bit more interesting. The only thing they add in there is the sorcery elements, which again feel a little underdeveloped, a little less than what they could have been potential-wise. They didn't really try hard enough to really kind of inject what they had going on at the time, demonstrating they had better ideas to go forth on from the television series, and really not developing any of that into the film end of the production of the franchise and everything. Kind of underwhelming in that type of way. And the effects work of the film is definitely dated 90s CGI with a $26 million budget. You couldn't get too far on that with the digital effects technology at the time. Certainly at the time they probably seemed pretty dazzling in a certain way, or at least that's what probably the filmmakers were thinking, like we got dazzling special effects or whatnot, they'll impress new audiences and it'll be like a special effects bonanza of some sorts. To really kind of throw all those effect shots in the trailer, make it look much more fantastical and exciting and whatnot. And yeah, they don't really hold up greatly. Some shots are worse than others. They generally are okay in a lot of places, but just like you can, if you're looking at it for the first time in 2018 eyes and whatnot, they certainly would look very dated, and there's some certain shots that do look a little cheap and whatnot. And in the extended home video version, which again adds in more violence, as in that nice little sex scene we had there, and various other bits and pieces, did add in a few other effect shots that in the international cut of the film and the original theatrical cut, you just saw when Kane arrives in New York, he's just walking along in a shipyard, probably implying he just jumped on a ship and somehow got from Japan over to New York in a span of a few days. Director's cut really kind of clears that up a little bit more with him kind of walking through a digital effects portal or whatnot to really kind of imply that he has the ability of teleportation, which again begs the question why he was locked up in a cave for 400 years if he could just teleport out. And there's a few little effect shots here and there that kind of spice things up and refine some little bits and pieces here, even in the climax of the film where they're really kind of trying to apping up the final quickening or whatnot. Slightly throw in a little shot from the first film, but add a little extra digital effects really kind of just make it feel sort of final in a certain way. But again, they had that little stinger at the end of the film, which implies they want to do another sequel, so it's not really over. Stupid nonsense continuity crap, but regardless of that, they do add in a few little nice little things with that director's cut, which sadly is only available on like a non-anamorphic DVD. All the later DVD releases are pretty much the international version, and even the Blu-rays that are out there, which aren't very easy to find. There's a really bad one in Germany, not a terribly great one in Australia, and a fairly okay one in Japan if you can get it, and you can pay about $50 for it. A lot of that stuff has been swirled around, and we got like 3 different cuts of the film: US theatrical cut, international cut, director's cut. And there's not a major difference between these things in terms of storyline or whatnot. Just like a few little bits and pieces added in or shifted around a slight bit, but it's nothing too dramatic to change the storyline or general quality of the film. But it's sort of a nice little thing to kind of see those different effect shots and add those little things in there that, again, fix some continuity things, but then create other questions about why things are as they are in the film and why the script isn't as shored up as it possibly could be. Well, something that is nicely shored up is J. Peter Robinson's score for this film, which does get a little bit overshadowed by some bad hard rock tracks that are very cheap as well. But the general quality of what he brings with his orchestral score following on from the beautiful mystique type of work that Michael Kamen did on the first film, much more lush operatic type of stuff Stuart Copeland did in the second. This one he puts in his own little stamp of things that has, again, a sense of breadth and depth to everything, and very strong sense of just giving a certain sense of musical scope to it in a certain way. I don't think is as good as Michael Kamen stuff at all, but it has a quality that just does stand up nicely on its own, that does have some sort of 90s type of sensual, sexy type of stuff in some places that definitely feel a slight bit dated, but it's still a good quality score that he puts together with his orchestra and all these different sounds he weaves into the whole thing, and having Lorena McKennitt add in Bonnie Portmore in this whole thing that would become a very nice staple for the franchise moving forward. Is very much identifiable with the Highlander franchise from this point forward. But like I said, there's some bad hard rock tracks in this whole thing, especially in the climax of the film, where I think Robinson really could have put together a really nice piece of climactic, operatic, sort of orchestral type of music for the final duel between MacLeod and Kane. Instead, he does a knockoff version of Dr. Feelgood from Motley Crue and just completely ruins the whole fucking thing. Whether it was really his thing or someone else's, but it's contributed to him on the sort of truncated soundtrack album that's out there with a compilation of tracks from the first 3 films. It's a really bad piece of thing. It's just like, why the fuck did you do that? Why are you ripping off Motley Crue in the climax of a Highlander film? It just makes no sense whatsoever. I understand that you want to go for that MTV style or whatnot, but it just feels so terribly out of place, so terribly cheap. It's like, you got a solid composer here who's done some really nice work before this, and especially after this, who could have done just as good of a job as he did throughout the entire thing to put together a nice orchestral piece that felt very nice, very strong, and very climactic in a certain way. Instead, he goes the cheap route and they have him rip off a freaking rock track and just kind of shit the bed a little bit. It's like, when we get to that point, it's like, god damn it. It could have been so much better. It's like, it's good cinematography, it's good blocking of action, good choreography. All the action in the film is so wonderfully done in this whole thing. Like, it is very consistent on that type of level. The sword fights are all very well done. The action is beautifully blocked out and choreographed and edited together. It's all wonderfully constructed. You have all these nice sequences. You got this really good sort of industrial environment to have this battle in, and great visuals and nice dynamics and all this type of stuff. And you just completely sour it by putting this cheap ass knockoff rock track in the whole thing. I don't know why they did it. I can't seem to find any other version of the film that doesn't have that track in it, despite some claims that the international version doesn't have it. It does seem to have it. But in general, Highlander 3 is one of those films that you got such an egregious thing with Highlander 2, The Quickening. Highlander Endgame is kind of a mess in a certain way. They've re-edited that film so many fucking times that just like makes no goddamn sense. Let's not even talk about the source. That's a complete steaming pile of shit. This show is kind of like the least egregious one of the entire sequels. But still, because it just didn't do anything. It really just didn't try anything. It didn't have any ambition behind it. It didn't really have a lot of drive and motivation to really kind of revive the franchise in a spectacular type of way. They went a very safe type of fashion, and again paid for at the box office, getting $36.8 million worldwide of a $26 million budget. Very much going down in flames in that type of way, and really only like home video and cable distribution really kind of gave it any type of profit, probably. And that's kind of the thing with this whole franchise. They put them out theatrically. They don't make a lot of money at the box office, but kind of like home video and cable sales kind of make up for it in the long run. But it's such an interesting franchise in that type of way that you had such an interesting mix of different production problems with many of these films. So many different cuts of these films as well. Every single one of them has alternate versions put out in the theaters or whatnot or what have you. It's such an interesting franchise that is just fascinating to explore. Again, I could go round and round with this whole thing. It's like, can I recommend Highlander 3 as the thing? If you're a Highlander fan, you probably checked it out and you probably have your own opinion of it, which I'll definitely implore you to put in the comments below, but it's okay. If you're not looking for an offensive Highlander film, I think this is probably the next best choice to the original film, because Highlander 2 is just terrible. It's just terrible. The Highlander Endgame, you have to watch the television series to really get a lot of the context and a lot of the connection with the characters and everything like that. And let's not even go any further than that, because it just gets bad. It gets bad, 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 bad. Regardless of that, Highlander 3, you can go check it out. Again, it's sad that there's no US Blu-ray release, but apparently the version that's up on streaming services is a fairly decent HD version of the film. So go check that out or pick up one of the DVDs. Like I said, there's been 2 different DVD releases with 2 different cuts on it. The non-anamorphic one is the proper director's cut. The anamorphic release is the international cut of the film that doesn't have any of the extra effect shots, but generally has the same different qualities of the film in general. So, Highlander 3, I know you guys have kind of asked for a little bit more Highlander, and this one's a little bit more the limper Highlander film, but will I do Highlander Endgame? I'll have to build myself up for that, because there's a lot to get into on that film if I want to do that. There's like 3 different versions of that film that are all radically different from one another. So guys, post your comments about Highlander 3 down below. Thumbs up if you enjoyed this ranting nonsense that I've had to give on this film. But regardless of that, guys, thanks always for watching and supporting things and just enjoying what I have here and spreading the links around social media and just sticking around in general and enjoying what I have to offer. So guys, thanks much. Take care. Bye-bye.